right, that should be working. Okay, yes, it looks like we are live. Hello, everyone. How are you all doing tonight? This is, by the way, not the monthly live stream. This is me doing the monthly AMA answers from the $3 patrons, which I normally do as a separate video, but real life keeps happening. I'm like, well, Heather closes tonight. I got a few hours. I'm just going to do it as a live stream. So I might do an edited down version of this for people who just want to see the answers. But so far we got Chris and Wes. How are you guys doing?
Hey. So-so. Kind of trying to get some other stuff done IRL. That's why I haven't uploaded much content lately on my part. Some struggles, IRL struggles.
So for those of you who don't know, if you are at least a $3 supporter on Patreon or Subscribestar, you can ask me anything you want, one question a month. The links are below to ask questions for December. So let me go ahead and kick it off with the questions they asked in November, with Huge Sinker starting off with a pretty good one. How's your year going so far? Can I answer that with just a groan?
Into that.
I'm pretty sure everyone except Kamala Harris is thinking that.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, aside from the political and aside from the COVID stuff, it hasn't actually been a bad year for me. In fact, I may come out, financially ahead a little bit. Not as far ahead as I would be if COVID hadn't hit, but, it hasn't been quite so bad. Hello, my last sock puppet account. What about you guys? How's your year going?
Like I said initially about how I was doing. Same answer. Just add a few other groans. Say struggles are real, bitch. Right. Some things are objectively better though, so we'll see what happens.
Yep.
Some of it'll depend on it.
SKM wants to know when the next real live stream is, and the answer is I don't know. Probably next week. We'll just have to see how schedules go out. So.
Yeah. And as for how my year,
I'm trying to think of anything really eventful this year aside from the COVID. So I think I told you guys that my nephew got COVID. Well, now my niece has it. So, it's going around that end of things. So.
Does that mean your brother and sister are gonna soon have it too, or?
Well, no, because they're grown and out of the house, and they're in different areas. Oh. So my sister lives with my mom, and we're really trying to keep my mom isolated because she's in her 80s. I mean, she's really healthy, but, she's at that high-risk age group.
Yep.
Yeah, nothing especially eventful, but just financially. I don't know how much of this is a regression to the mean or whatever, but the portfolio I've gotten has been really going gangbusters this year. In fact, I think I made over $10,000 just in this last month alone. So that's pretty darn good.
And as for my year, it's going pretty bad, but like I said, I'm not going to go into details why.
Yeah. So, if I can get this house paid off, that is going to help me a lot. So.
Yeah. Well, you probably would have paid it off sooner if the government didn't mess up the housing market in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't had the accident in 2006, that wiped out a lot of my.
Oh yeah.
My savings is nowhere near where it should be, but it's getting back up there. So,
okay.
So
second
hopefully.
Question.
All right. Second question. This is from Pierre. What is your response to the argument that we should not legalize prostitution, only decriminalize, because human trafficking reports increase after legalizing? Well, first of all, what do you actually mean by human trafficking?
And what do you mean by reports?
That was the second thing I was going to go to. But, I mean, first of all, with human trafficking, people think about, kidnapping someone and bringing her, into the country for prostitution or whatever. But when we're specifically talking about legalization, like, geez, what was it? One of the European countries legalized prostitution. And so they said, oh, well, there's all this human trafficking in there. Well, the human trafficking was just women voluntarily going into the country, to do sex work. And we saw it was like in what state it was. I think it was like, because in Nevada, prostitution is legal. And I think it was Colorado. And she had a client that was in Colorado. And so she went to him and they arrested her because prostitution is illegal in Colorado. But they charged her with human trafficking of herself.
Wow. Also, a little correction. I don't think prostitution isn't legal in Nevada. It's just that there's a slab outside of Las Vegas, which it's technically a part of Las Vegas, but it's also technically not a part of Las Vegas. So legally, it's not in any of the counties. So therefore, it doesn't qualify for the vice
I thought it was
laws.
at least out in the counties surrounding Las Vegas because it's not legal in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So legal retardees, it's not so set in stone. Got it.
Yeah. And then reports you mentioned, Chris, was the second thing. It's like, how much of it are you just hearing about? Because, I'm sure back in the 1920s, if you went around people and asked them, hey, do you drink alcohol? They'd all be like, nope, of course not. Completely law-abiding here, not doing it. And now everyone talks about going and grabbing a beer, They're more open about it now that it's legal, so... But there is when what people think of as human trafficking, the actually forcing someone into sex work, that happens way more when it's illegal.
Oh yeah,
extremely, holy shit.
Here's what I say. Look at drugs and alcohol. When they were illegal, what was a popular black market job? Smuggling
booze, smuggling drugs, especially pot, because it was a big favorite. Your handle literally every fuck thing else.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and even if you were just setting up a moonshine still on your own, if the revenuers found out about it,
they would basically do what they did to Popcorn Sutton until he finally killed himself. Which I love Hank Williams saying the company was going to sell a weakened version of his recipe. He said, fuck you, I'm not supporting. And Hank Williams Jr. told him that. Fuck you, I'm not supporting your asses. Like that. But
there's a lot of songs like that. Like Copperhead Road is one, Rocky Top's another, where there's a verse about someone's making moonshine and a revenuer goes up to catch him and the revenuer is never seen again. So of course, in the folk songs, the revenuer always loses. That's just how it is.
Which they should.
Yep. Yeah, when people were actually resisting bad laws, imagine that.
Yeah.
All right, next one is Thomas Urbanski. And he asks Bob, whom I'm guessing is just not anyone specifically. It's just like a generic Bob person. Bob has a discussion on the internet that is visible to the public. Bob has a job and responsibilities, so he doesn't want to spend too much time on it. Bob notices that the other side is strawmanning him, but also understands how observers could be tricked. Is there a way for Bob to exit the discussion while leaving clear hints for future observers? And also in the chat, hello to JC Scorch and SKM again. Yeah.
I guess he's asking. It's like, how do you get out of a discussion that's clearly just being a brick wall without it making it look like the other side saying, "Ha! I made him leave. That means I won."
Yeah, and that's a tricky one. The thing is, he needs to exit quickly, and generally the exit strategy is to make the other side show themselves for what they are, but that can take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But if you push them enough, they'll show their true colors.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But I don't know about quickly. Yeah. Other than just posting the reputations of the straw man and things like that. Yeah, ask him to. Marco says ask him to put up or shut up. Yeah. And SKM before that on the previous question asked, do you think prohibitionists got off lightly after how badly it went? Yeah, they pretty much should all have been put in prison, in my opinion.
Yeah.
All right. You guys have any ideas about Thomas's question? Well, thank you for your input.
Nope, just leave the discussion and talk to a potted plant, because you're probably gonna have a better, more productive conversation talking to them. Yeah.
Yeah. Just
Isn't that
correct
isn't
the
that-
straw man and
Smoke
say
a
I'm
potted
out of here.
plant
Yeah.
And try to
Yeah.
talk to one, Mr.
Yeah.
Frank.
isn't that right, Mr. Daffodil? And what do you know? You're a flower.
Well, let's ask someone more intelligent. What do you think, Wall? You know.
Yeah.
Brick
All
wall
right.
or stainless steel or nitronic? Which one? Are we going off of strength equivalent to intelligence equivocation? What are we going off of here?
I don't know. I think any of them would be better than some of these discussions.
Yeah.
So yeah, stay in there too long and they would just resort to a gish gallop. Yeah, don't get caught in the gish gallop. Don't get caught when they shift the burden of proof thinking you have to support it. Just, don't fall into those traps.
Or they try-
You start out from arguing the negative, and they try to do that. They have no real answer, and they're just trying to piss you off. That's all they're fucking doing. I've done this with. I've made progressivists screech when I'd said, "Hey, put up or shut the fuck up." Marco and I argued a couple of guys on a video. They were trying to justify the minimum wage through a federal mandate and lied to their. I suckered one to catch him. Marco pulled it out the water beautifully. It was a shit show. I forgot what was it like? What was it, Marco? Like 240 or 250 something fucking comments.
I caught part of that, but I
didn't.
I didn't go through all of it. But geez, man. Yeah. Yep, the brick wall, I think, is what you're better off with.
Or if they don't, when the gish gallop doesn't make you buck, they'll screech.
Yep.
Okay, so what's next? Is this a Subscribe
All
Star
right.
or Patreon?
We're going over to Patreon now.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, and this is yours. Okay, so
Okay.
you ask, I have a question, Shane. Why do you think the villain in a lot of movies, comics, and books is almost always an evil corporation, and the plots always involve the corporation doing something that for a private company would make zero economic or practical sense, but is plausible by a government? Do you think it's just laziness or indoctrination? Well, I made this point before. I mean, if you want to tell like a big story, like a big world-changing story, not like a simple police procedural type thing, but, like finding the big enemy, you really only have three options: government, organized crime, or a big corporation. So that's really your options.
Some of those evil corporation tropes are just so ridiculous. It's like, okay, listen, we caused this disaster, and it's going to cost us a lot of public publicity and millions of dollars in revenue. Therefore, I propose we spend millions of dollars hiring a private army and killing anyone that knows about it, because that totally will work.
And JC says, because the writers know nothing about economics. Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it. But I mean, I don't really think it's laziness if you're talking about the situation being set up, because I mean, yeah, you do kind of want a backstory, but you don't really want to go into a whole lot of detail about it. I think it's really only laziness on the part of writers when it drives the plot, or even especially as a resolution to it. And Marco Polo says, to be fair, sometimes there is a resistance versus authoritarian faction in video games where both are gray and the resistance are portrayed as terrorists. That's generally what they say. One man's terrorist is another's freedom fighter.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, but groups like ISIS and communist guerrillas, they are not quote-unquote freedom fighters.
I think it's like if you're deliberately targeting like innocents or people who aren't actually your targets, then you'd be a terrorist.
Yeah.
But I mean, a gray area might be Timothy McVeigh, because I mean, he targeted a government building because his beef was with the government, so it wasn't like, the World Trade Towers or anything like that.
Oh, yeah.
But on the other hand, it wasn't the actual ones who were involved in the Waco siege. So.
Yeah. From what I heard, that's actually what he wanted to do. He originally just wanted to target, the commanders, that were involved in the Waco and Ruby Ridge siege, but he couldn't get to them, and he ultimately felt that blowing up a government building would get his point across better. Yeah, Timothy McVeigh is an odd one. I saw a leftist claim that Timothy McVeigh was proof of, of a quote-unquote, libertarian terrorist. But I'm like, I don't know about McVeigh, because I mean, if you actually read about his personal views, he's all over the place.
Yeah.
Like some people say he was a racist because he read the Turner Diaries, but he was much more interested in the idea of overthrowing the government, not establishing a white race. We don't know. I've read about Timothy McVeigh, and even I don't understand him.
So Marco Polo follows up, even then the resistance are almost always shown to be justified and the lighter shade of gray. So, and I mean, I think you do find plenty of examples where it's the government or the military or something like that who are the bad guys. And a $5 super chat from Khalif Jones, asking the big questions. What are your thoughts on the election so far? Do you think the election was stolen from Trump, or is he a sore loser? Is Rand Paul 2024 viable? I don't know about Rand Paul, but someone had posted something to one of the Discords. It was something like whatistheevidence.com or something like that.
Oh, it's Here Is the Evidence. And
Here Is the Evidence.
It was me that posted it in the general.
Yeah. Yeah, I took a look at that. I mean, I didn't click on any of the links or something, but man, it was this whole big long list of things that are just crazy. And I mean,
absolutely foobarred.
I mean, I have read some things that are pretty much undeniable. Like, I don't remember if this was Michigan or Georgia or somewhere. The states are like just melding together in my mind. But in one of them, they were looking at, physically how quickly a ballot machine could feed the paper through. And it was something like running continuously, even assuming there were no paper jams or anything like that. It could only do something like 30,000 votes in an hour processing them. And yet in 1 hour, it registered like 150,000 votes for Biden. So it was like physically impossible. So.
And I'm sorry, folks, but you voter glitch. I'm sorry that unless you can deliberately prove a glitch, you press X to doubt that, because software and do what they're programmed to do, even rig things if they're signaled.
Well, and even without that, I mean, I've covered on the podcast, basically DEF CON year after year has Voting Village, where they grab a bunch of these voting machines and see if people can hack them, and they're always hacked.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
The
tape of the Georgia election. Is that the one where, I mean, there's no audio. I would like to see if there's audio. But it's pretty clear that they're talking to the observers, and they're sending the observers out, and they're putting the cloth over the tables like they're closing down and everything. And then the rest of them are gone, and then like 3 or 4 of them, maybe 5, start processing ballots again after everyone's gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just blatant point.
Yeah, and here's the thing, people. Look, love him or hate him, Trump does have every right to challenge the opponent during the election. And the funny irony, you brought this up multiple times, wouldn't Biden people want this to be investigated? Because here's the thing, if you really, really hate Trump, what better way to humiliate him than prove him wrong?
Exactly.
I mean, with the situation as they've set up now, basically there's no way to get out of this without half the country thinking the election was stolen. If nothing comes of these lawsuits, then all the Trump people are going to think that Biden cheated and stole the election. If the lawsuits are successful and Trump becomes president, then all the Biden supporters are going to think that Trump stole the election. What the Biden people should really want, their best case scenario, is for all of these to go forward. We check out the ballots. We look at all of this stuff. We fix the problems. And Biden still wins. And that is the only way I think you're going to.
The pro-Bideners are doing the opposite of that. They're denying it. They're interfering with it. They're trying to stop it. You got rhinos in the Republican Party trying to help them interfere with every fucking step of the way.
Well, and even the judges.
They've gotten audits and seizures of the Dominion machine through an audit. And they've also are doing secondary investigations right now. And PA is already going to SCOTUS, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there was one thing about Pennsylvania that I was looking at, and my chat is getting cut off. But it was one of the judges that they were coming forward and they say, okay, let's have our evidence be heard. And the way you do that is with an evidentiary hearing. The judge denied them the evidentiary hearing, and then dismiss the lawsuit because they didn't present any evidence. Well, how can they when you deny them the evidentiary hearing?
Exactly. So it's. May I make this little piece clear a little bit, folks? Just before we go any further, we had 2 votes this year. 2 votes. We had the presidential election vote, and we had the Convention of States vote. Convention of State has historically fixed problems consistently without interference or messing up before. And to let it happen again and actually participate in positing solutions that could put into a possible amendment could actually be a realistic solution. And it actually has power. It's one of the things in the Constitution that's still alive and still very strong.
I think tomorrow
support this.
I think tomorrow, the 8th, is the day to watch because that's the what do they call it? It's the safe harbor date, the last date you can bring through complaints. Yeah. And so this is where all of the things are going to be heard, all the judgments are going to be made. I think the Supreme Court's actually looking at a couple of things. So tomorrow will be interesting.
It is very possible that it'll be delayed past that, though.
Yeah.
And again,
the 8th isn't like this hard and fast date. A court can always say, you know what, look, there's too much, you got to push your safe harbor date out.
Yep,
yeah, and again, and this is, I'll say this real quickly before we move on to Joff Haven's questions, but another thing that really grinds my gears still to this day is they still are saying Biden is the presidential elect. It's like, no, nobody knows who's going to be the next guy until January.
Yep. January is where it's finally certified.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of things. By design, there's all sorts of things that can happen before then. Our founding fathers wanted this to be second guest and third guest and fourth guest. They really wanted to be sure about it.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. This is the thing, folks. There was a guy from Europe that told me that they would decide with the Democrats. I was like, no, they probably do something. I won't say on the stream, because I don't want to get Shane Killian nay-nayed too, but they would probably do something to both parties right now if they were around.
Yeah.
If they could come back from the grave and do it.
Involving muskets and cannons, yeah.
And probably tanks and every modern thing they could learn how to use.
Okay,
Yep.
They would go full out.
Okay, let's go to Josh Havens now before we get sidetracked.
Okay, well, I'm not counting that as a sidetrack because Khalif did pay $5 for that one.
Okay,
so.
yeah.
That's a good one. But the short answer is I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see.
Okay.
Okay, so Josh Havens asks, what are your top 5 movies? You did that on purpose, didn't you? Last month I say no more superlatives. What do you do? Ask me about superlatives. All right, with the disclaimer that this is going to change every time you ask me. I guess I always got to put 2001 on top. And then my usual, I guess, I always include, I think, The Martian and WALL-E. Those are just 2 of the best movies ever made. If I'm going to move away from science fiction, because I don't want to just pet everything with science fiction, I think I got to add the Sidney Lumet 12 Angry Men, the one with Henry Fonda. That's a really good one.
Too bad that would never hit. Oh,
what's that?
I was about to say, too bad that would never happen in a modern day court because it's like, hey, judge, one of the jurors knows what jury nullification is, and he knows what his rights and powers as a juror are. Oh, he's unreliable. Kick him out.
Well, that was the thing. None of them expressly talked about jury nullification.
Well, still,
even though that's kind of what they did, you don't have to say, hey, we have the power of nullify in a way that would make them just like, no, we're just examining the evidence.
Well, still, with the way courts are set up these days, yeah, if you know what your rights and powers as a juror are, the judge is going to be like, you're biased, you have to go, you're not reliable.
Yeah.
Yeah, they want.
I don't know. I think the only thing that a judge would have a problem with what they did was when they reenacted, the old man with the bad leg getting to the door in 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Because from what I'm told by legal experts, that's going beyond what a jury is supposed to do. But I don't know. I mean, I would think a reality check of that kind of thing would be fine.
I will say this too, and this is most importantly, I hate it when you hear judges or prosecutors, talk about how the jury has to be unbiased at all costs. It's like, no, jurors are supposed to be biased. It's as we said, you're supposed to presume the defendant is innocent until they can prove beyond reasonable doubt he's guilty.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be biased toward the defendant.
Yeah. Yep. That's why I probably would never be selected for jury duty, because I would say that I'd say, I know what my rights and powers as a jury are. I know what jury nullification is, and I'm going to be biased of the presumption of innocence until you can prove me otherwise. And like I said, the DA is going to say, yeah, this Chris guy, I don't want him. He's going to be trouble.
Yeah, okay, think of a fifth one. I'm sorry, go ahead.
If I was to do jury duty, if someone was to assign me to jury duty, I'd tell them I'm part of ISIS or something. Try to be up as I can. Try to be spooked up as I can, even though it might, or maybe tone it down by about 2 fractions. So try to minimize getting thrown in a random jail cell.
Well, one guy told me the best way to avoid jury duty is, like I said, just tell them you know what your rights and powers as a juror are, because both because both prosecutors and lawyers want, I wouldn't say stupid jurors, but easily manipulated ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, they want ones that, won't ask too many questions. They just want ones that they can tug at the heartstring at.
That's a good question, Bateman. That's a good one, and that's my
okay.
Answer.
What was your fifth movie, Shane?
Fifth one. Let's see. I think this time I'm gonna go with Inherit the Wind, the one with Frederick March and Spencer Tracy.
Yeah,
that's a really good one. Ask me next month, I'll have a different list. But the first 3 will probably be the same, but probably they're always going to have 2001, The Martian, and WALL-E on it.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's just so many good classic movies.
Yeah. Well, we better get to Pipsqueaks because he's got a big one.
Oh, yeah, that's why I did it in this order, to save Pips for last. And I didn't know if he was going to make it on there, because this might be a good discussion, but all right, he says, I've been thinking a lot about economic theory recently, and the paradox of thrift keeps getting stuck in my head. To me, it begs a critical question of why people save. I think it's for 2 reasons: to save for a future purchase or to hedge against risk. If during a crisis a lot of people start saving, doesn't that indicate that not enough people were already saving to begin with? If people have enough in the bank, what reason is there to save further? I think that the paradox of thrift is only a problem if there already isn't enough saving to insulate against any crisis or shock. Your thoughts on this? All right, so maybe we should back up a step. The paradox of thrift is one of those central tenets of the Keynesian religion. And basically what it says is that if you save money, if you put it in the bank, then that has a repressive effect on the economy, because it's just sitting there not doing anything. You're hoarding it. What you need to do is you need to go out there and spend it and get that circular flow going. Of course, anyone familiar with J.B. Say knows the problem with that, because what really causes the economy to improve is investment. And all saving is investment of one form or another. So, but I think this is all going to come down to interest rates, because when things are going great, interest rates get low in a free market. We've got all sorts of crazy things going on here with central banks, but in a free market, when things are going great, interest rates are low. That means that people might save a bit, but they're just going about doing their thing. And you got to look at the other side as well. The borrowers, they're going to invest in longer term projects. They might build a factory that's going to take them 30 or 40 years to pay off, because they're figuring that, like over this period of time, they'll be making in enough money to make the payments on it and pay it back. When things start to go a little caca, that's when the interest rates go up. And the interest rates are there because, generally, like it says, during a crisis, people don't want to start saving. The way you get them to save more in a crisis is for the interest rates to go up. So that encourages them, that gives them a better return, and that encourages them to save more. On the other end of things, if you're actually borrowing and to make new capital investments. That borrowing, you're not going to want to do it long term. You're not going to want to, do a 12% interest rate on something that's going to take you 40 years to get back. You would do it for something that that would only be for, like 6 months or a year or something like that, short-term projects. And that's kind of what we saw at the start with COVID. They were doing the short-term things like stepping up production of masks and parts for ventilators and things like that. That's kind of what you want to do in a crisis to kind of get everyone over the top of it. So interest rates play a lot of that. But of course, in the real world, we've got the central banks messing everything up. People aren't saving anywhere near as much as they would because the central bank just keeps pushing rates down to the floor. And that's why people are saving more during the crisis, when if anything it should be the other way around, because now they're saying, well, I don't know when we're going to get out of this, and I don't have that much socked away, so I need to save more. And well, that's because you're monkeying around with interest rates too much. You want to be doing that when things are going well, and then when you come in, you jack up the interest rates to kind of encourage a little more saving, but you're also encouraging the borrowing for shorter term projects instead of long term.
May I shout out to Andy Davis for making a great fucking point?
Sure.
That quantitative easing had proved to actually harm productive spending.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I kind of lost track of the chat there.
It looks like the Consumer 23 has a question for you, saying, Shane, what do you think of the argument that schools can never work well privately because demand for education is quote-unquote fixed?
No,
For example,
demand is
the
fixed.
second burger joint is established, overall demand goes up, but when an education with the same amount of students stays the same, competition is hampered.
This is the kind of thing we hear about all sorts of stuff. We hear it about healthcare. We hear it about also demand is fixed. By that argument, shouldn't the demand for food be fixed? And yet it isn't. They used to argue that all the time with gasoline. The demand for gasoline was fixed. And then Katrina hit and gas prices went up. And, well, that got debunked pretty quickly, didn't it?
Yeah.
Damn right it did.
So,
Fuck.
Yeah.
I was in the eye of, I think it was either it or Rita. Right smack dab in the middle of the eye.
When you're looking at and talking in microeconomics, not macroeconomics, when they're talking about fixed demand, the examples they come up with are things like a stadium where you have a certain number of seats. You can't just like add extra seats, take seats out, things like that. I'm sorry, that would be a fixed supply and not fixed demand, but
yeah, that's
I don't know of anything where there's fixed demand for.
Yeah, that and it's pretty funny because a lot of communists seem to think like that too. Like they seem to think everything is a fixed sum game and all that. It's like. I think that's the reason for the paradox of thrift, because you're just thinking of, there's money that's sitting here in the bank as opposed to the money that's getting spent. Well, that money is getting spent because the way banks make money is that they loan it out for a higher interest rate than they're giving you. All right, so if you have a CD or something like that, and you have it in there for 6 months, and they say, okay, we'll give you 3%. And then at the end of 6 months, we'll figure, they're going to loan that out at 5%. Yeah, because I remember reading when I was a lot younger, I read a book about banks, and one of the things it pointed out is that contrary to popular belief, unless you bring a lot of money and specifically ask it to be held within the vault, when you give them money and say, put this in my account, they're not actually physically putting, the money in an account like at Gringotts. Rather what your money is it's basically, a credit statement. Basically, it's basically saying next time you come in here and you say, like if you put $100 in and then a couple weeks later you want 100 out of there, that's what it is. They're giving you that $100 because you put in there. It's a credit system, basically.
But that's with fractional reserve. They keep like a certain part. Like if you deposit $100, they might keep $10 of it in reserve and loan the rest out. You're really only going to be able to sustain that with a central bank to bail everyone out, because when you have a run on the bank, when people are trying to withdraw more money than the bank has in its vaults, then that becomes a problem. And as soon as word of that gets out, everyone else starts running up wanting their money back. because they're demand
just like,
deposits.
just like what happened when FDR implemented his bank holiday.
That was actually Hoover's idea.
Yeah.
And if they had implemented it when Hoover wanted to, it might have actually had an effect. But Hoover was already a lame duck. In fact, this is one of the reasons for the lame duck amendment to the Constitution. The new Congress had already taken place, and FDR was lobbying them heavily not to do that. And so they just they stonewalled Hoover every step of the way. And then FDR gets in thinking he's going to be the big hero. I've got this great idea. We'll do a bank holiday. And by that time, it was too late to do any good.
Oh, Andy Davis and Ethan Bateman both asked a good question. Andy's was, so wait, are high interest rates in a recession a good thing? And Ethan Bateman's question was, is it even possible to have a fixed demand?
Yeah, I don't even think it's possible to have fixed demand. I'm racking my brain and I can't think of any examples.
Yeah, fixed demand.
The closest I could come to fixed supply was the stadium, but,
Yeah, I mean, I can't see demand because, like you said, Shane, and you pointed this out in multiple quickies and other, things too. It's like, just because someone has a preference doesn't mean that's the only place they're going to go to. Like going back to fast food restaurants, you could be the biggest McDonald's fan ever, but that doesn't mean you want to eat there every day. Some days you're thinking, you know what? I think I'm going to go to Taco Bell today, like that,
Yeah, just to have something a little different.
Yeah.
And as far as Andy's question is concerned, in fact, I think this is Wednesday's quickie on something called scientism, which is different from science itself. It's when you take science as some kind of means to draw value judgments. It's not that high interest rates in a recession are a good thing. It's just that that's kind of naturally what happens and how the market corrects itself. Whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing is not something any science can tell you. So, I mean, we can go on and on about all these studies about, how the minimum wage destroys jobs and how it destroys jobs for these particular groups, blacks and minorities and things like that. But as soon as you say, and therefore we shouldn't have a minimum wage, that's the point where you're leaving the realm of economics and going into political theory.
Yeah, I mean,
science is descriptive, not prescriptive. It doesn't actually tell you what's good or bad.
The thing.
Yeah.
Even Keynesians are making their point. Even like the biggest one I've seen with a big subscription account, Economics Explained. Even they've described that if you want to have get rid of a labor demand,
horribly run school and the kids are all failing, that must mean, hey, we need to give that school more money, and so you're incentivizing failure.
Yeah.
Oh, Andy was saying he supposed what he meant was is a good thing is it doesn't lead to a faster recovery. He's talking about the interest rates going up.
Yeah. You really need that to have a better recovery. And government's gotten into this head that no, high interest rates are bad. We need to push interest rates down to the floor and things like that.
And then we get a housing crisis, so we can blame it on the banks,
Blame it on the bank,
yeah,
the private banks,
it's like
the real estate people, and all that bullshit.
Yeah, it's like why did you give out these loans to people who obviously can't pay them back? Because you told us interest rates were going to be good, so it was low risk at the time.
Fixed demand is in there's a certain amount of students. Well, yeah, but there are options. I mean, you can homeschool or whatever.
Yeah. And Pipsqueak didn't get my joke. I'm sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Consumer actually has a good point. Well, the same thing can be said for stomachs. Like I was saying about food, there's a fixed number of stomachs out there, and they're only so big. Yeah.
What was the fucking Krugman's bullshit where he tried to blame the housing bubble on some foreign little country that couldn't do shit to call
Estonia.
Affect it?
Estonia.
Blaming Estonia for it in 2009. It's like, what kind of shit are you smoking? Keep it away from my ass. Get the fuck out of here.
And then he was saying that, Estonia is, horrible. It's crappy. It's going to be, the last country to recover. And it was one of the first to recover because it didn't bail out its banks or push down interest rates or do anything like that. And then he tried to say, well, it's the euro. It's because they went on the euro that they recovered. But they recovered well in 2009 and didn't go on the euro until 2011. And you gotta love how these things kind of precede. It's like we're seeing, this year with the mask mandates. Look, the mask mandates work. Yeah, the mask mandates started working 2 weeks before you passed it. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I tell you, this is what I did. Like I did a video on it actually when it got to 30-something thousand. I think it was like 30. I forgot how many thousand case it was. I got myself a little bit of colloidal silver, but folks, do not drink that shit, or you're gonna turn into a giant Smurf. Do not.
Oh, I remember Blue Guy. Yeah.
You're gonna turn into a fucking giant Smurf with a blurple dick. It's not good. Do not fucking do it, or you're head ass and you ask for it.
Yeah, but Pip, we are, I think, technically trying to answer your question right now. So if you want to go ahead and pop on in, and we can continue talking.
I was just saying that I used it to spray the outside of my mask, let it dry in before I put it on, and the rubber gloves I use, so it'll kill on any microbes on contact. So colloidal silver can do, depending on the right particle size.
Yeah.
A minute now, we'll link, show you, send the PDF away.
Pipsqueak didn't get my late joke. Yeah, he said, "Damn it, I'm late," and I told him, "You're late. Oh my God, you better take a morning after pill."
So basically, I think let's try to recap his question to make sure we answered it. People say for 2 reasons: to save for future purchase or to hedge against risk. It's really all about time shifting. And hey, Pip, this is actually something that I've heard from charities in places like sub-Saharan Africa. These small little villages where they've basically been the same tribe for thousands of years. And like one thing is like if you give them there was one time I was reading about where they were doing Christmas, and they were giving everyone their Christmas presents. If you give them like something that can be like easily divided out like candies or something like that, what they'll immediately do is go and spread it all around with everyone else and share it. And you think, well, okay, that's pretty sweet. But the problem is they do that with everything, and they're having a hard time explaining to them, how savings work and how capital investment works. So that, you can save up, you can open a store, and you can benefit people even more in the long run by saving it up. And it's not like they're a bunch of socialists who think it's immoral. It's just such a foreign way of thinking. They've been doing it this way for thousands of years. It's hard to get their brains going, in that new way of thinking of, of the time shifting, the time preference. Because, I guess if you are a hunter-gatherer society, that's all you're doing is you're just continually working for your short-term sustainability, and you're not in a position to think about, 5 years or 30 years from now. So it's a big shift in thinking.
Yeah. So suck it, anarcho-primitivists.
Yeah.
Basically, suck a fat one. Boo-hoo.
And also that question, doesn't that indicate that not enough people were already saving to begin with? I think it goes back to what I was saying, Marco, earlier about scientism. It's like, there is no correct amount of people who were saving and the correct amount of money. It's just about who wants to save. But when you monkey around with incentives with the central bank, you end up with a lot more problems.
This kind of reminds me of, Shane. It reminds me of this really good quote I heard about, and it was talking about mathematics and all that. And he said, and here's the biggest thing that a lot of people who are big math whizzes seem to always forget and get wrong. Numbers are not facts. They just tell you what the results of an equation are.
Yep.
Yeah.
Garbage in, garbage out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, sorry about that. I had to switch networks because my connection was awful.
Ah. Okay.
How much of your
answer did you hear?
Probably none of it.
Okay. It's a lot. It's a lot to recap.
So I've missed 40 minutes. I'll go and rewatch the stream. But if you need anything clarified.
Okay.
Yeah. If people have enough in the bank, what reason is there to save further? Was the next part, and I think that's kind of the idea. You do want to save enough for a rainy day, but with the central bank pushing interest rates down to the floor, you don't get that. And so when you do have something big, like COVID hitting, people are found that they don't really have enough saved up for it, or even not even a big thing like COVID, like in my case in 2006 when I was hit by a drunk driver, and that just completely, destroyed my savings that I've been working all this time to try and build back up.
Or even worse, Shane, the government the central bank pulls a Weimar Republic and they just print more money, so your savings are still intact, but the currency is so inflated, it's worthless.
Yeah.
So that
the purchasing power. Yeah.
Yeah, so that tens of thousands of dollars you've been saving up for decades for your retirement, now it's only worth $2.
Well, and it's like they got this idea during the Depression that, like, oh, deflation is bad. Well, deflation is bad when the central bank is just yanking assets out of the economy, and so that all of a sudden no one has any money. But that's different from deflation that occurs because of an increase in productivity or an increase in purchasing power. But no, they keep thinking like, oh, there's deflation. We got to print money and get inflation back up, or else we'll have another Great Depression. And they just don't understand why the Great Depression happened.
To back their bullshit claim up. No,
yeah.
There's absolutely fucking dick. Even the mainstreamers fucking admit this.
Yeah.
Well, as far as I can tell, like, if you look at the general relationship between money and the amount of goods in an economy, and inflation is what happens when you have an increase in the money supply. Deflation is what happens when you have a decrease in money supply relative to the goods and services that are available. If a money is deflating, would that not, like, absent a central bank and a government basically enforcing one single currency, does deflation in a currency not signal to the people who can make that currency? Say, for example, if you have an economy that runs primarily on gold coins, if you have deflation, would that not increase the number of people prospecting for gold because they can make a higher amount of profit making more money than they can doing something else?
Exactly. Yeah, they can do that. But I mean,
so
even
it's a
if
self-correcting problem.
Yeah, but I mean, even something like cryptocurrency where you can't do that, then it would still be the same effect. It would just have to be reflected in changing prices, not in actually, putting more currency into place. But yeah, with the proper gold standard, you'd have that, and you'd also have the opposite if things started going the other way. People would be, turning in their dollars for gold and then, putting the gold in their safes or whatever.
Speaking of gold standard, though, I still get tired when people say, oh, but there's a finite amount of gold, so if the economy keeps growing, the gold won't be able to keep up with it.
Which is
That's
bullshit
not how it works,
all around. Tell them the last 6,000 years it's been done versus every attempt to do a paper money and fucking collapsed.
Well, I mean, if you just look at how much that happened between the start of this country and 1913, or even if you want to go to 1971, where we completely went off the gold standard, that wasn't happening. And I mean, our population just like grew by leaps and bounds, during that whole entire time, for the better part of 2 centuries, and it didn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, for fuck's sakes, we got off the standard when after the FDR, and we were on a reserve system until Bretton Woods. That's a common misconception a lot of people still peddle this day. We were on a gold reserve before Nixon kicked us off of it.
Yeah. That was the idea of the Bretton Woods standard. The dollar would be backed up by gold and the other currencies would be backed up by the dollar.
Well, technically it'd be a reserve, but still, if it went back on the Bretton Woods thing. And I think some economists have predicted if they try to do the Great Reset bullshit, when it does fall flat on its ass, which of course it will, because it's too big, it's too incompetent and too big to fucking work at all. So what there's going to happen is there's going to have to be a reset of an actual resetting of sorts and winding the clock back. And Peter Schiff was one of the guys that called it, because we're not going to have much choice.
Yeah.
And I think really it's going to be a combo of certain types of crypto and the pre-Bretton Woods gold metal reserve. It's going to be like a combo of the two, I think, personally.
Yeah.
Consumer 23 wants to talk about masks. If you guys are ready to move on to another subject.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
speaking of masks, just in time too. a few minutes ago, about 5 minutes ago, I posted the PDF of the antiviral broad spectrum antiviral properties of colloidal silver. Again, do not drink that, dude. You're stupid. Do not.
I'd be even iffy about putting it on a mask, lest I breathe it in. I don't even want to breathe it in.
I think I have these. I got these cloth masks filtered well by Humana. And all I do is spray a little outside section and let it
but
dry.
silver molecules are really, really, really tiny. They'd go even past an N95 mask.
Yeah. And the other thing too, if I don't want to do that, I really just stick to, my leg gloves and I pull them off and let them inside out. Dispose of them.
Yeah, but the basic thing is the N95 masks are the most effective at it. The surgical masks are less effective, but they're still pretty good. And then tying a hanky around your neck isn't all that effective, but it's better than nothing. So, I mean, it's a great. But keep in mind, you're not going to stop it. You might slow it down. You might give a little bit of protection. But I heard Tom Woods say this in a video: virus gonna virus.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Look, the COVID lockdown cult video he did, it's been being nay-nayed off YouTube like crazy.
Yep.
They've been censoring the fuck out of it.
Oh, sorry.
And mask mandates do not work, because if they worked, you'd be able to look at, the rise and drop in cases or whatever, and you'd be able to predict where the mask mandates were. And when you actually look at these graphs and you see where the mask mandates were passed or repealed or whatever, it's random. They're just stuck around everywhere. They make no difference at all. Because no matter what, you're always going to have, most people I think are going to wear masks even absent a mandate, because they want to stop the spread of this thing. You're always going to have people who are going to refuse to wear a mask no matter what. And I don't think the mandates really change that significantly the percentage of people wearing masks.
And as the old saying goes, that we've said, if something is legitimately beneficial and it's absolutely good for people, you shouldn't have to enforce it.
Yeah.
All you'd have to do is tell them about it and explain it, and most of them will start doing it.
I fell out with a server of people I used to talk to a lot, but fucking nonsense. It's like, you want to actually give up people's fucking rights, including your own, just to feel safe. What the fuck is wrong with you? You're too spoiled. You're too fucking entitled. And I got into a cussing match with that entire Discord, and I just went off, and I burned my bridges with them over that. Look, I'm not a conspiratard by any fucking, but I don't believe in subjecting anyone else's negative rights or my own to have a safe feel, fee-fees, all right? Fuck off with that bullshit. That opinionation nonsense and these opinionation misconceptions of what rights are part of what's fucking wrong now.
Marco, don't just invest in gold. Have a nice, diverse portfolio. And one of the reasons my portfolio has done really well this year, part of it's a regression to the mean, but a lot of it is just the fact that it's diverse enough that with the ones I've selected, the ones that are doing the worst are kind of just holding their own. And then I got those couple that are really going like gangbusters. And that's what a good balanced portfolio will get you.
Not to mention silver as currency. Historically it worked, but today, I mean, the problem with silver and why we don't have a silver standard, like you said, Shane, is because nowadays we found so many uses for silver that it's actually better used as a utility material rather than a currency.
Well, technically you could use it as both, because as a currency, they always keep it undervalued on top of all those different uses. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
I mean, when you're discussing...
I think Ethan, since this is about the patrons and people who have actually paid more than $3, I think at least for purposes of this live stream, just to be fair, if you really want us to switch gears and talk about something extra, maybe send a $3 super chat. So something, Pip?
I just think the any discussion about is this good as a currency, you really gotta look at the core properties and functions of currency and money, and it's almost like a hypothetical discussion because government's legal tender laws disrupt the current market value quite a lot, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah,
trying to have a
because they all
conversation.
live in
It's like
that
it's like
age
trying to
gap.
have a conversation about is cryptocurrency good as money in Russia, except that the Russian government has banned the use of cryptocurrency as money. So it's like that's fairly big disruption.
Yeah. But I mean, Venezuela tried it, but their currency was just so crappy, people kept using it anyway, and Venezuela ended up kind of saying, yeah, okay, you can use cryptocurrency, just pay your taxes in it. So
Oy.
Isn't Zimbabwe the same thing where their dollar is so worthless that most people just use the U.S. dollar or the euro and
do
and
they
Zimbabwe-
even technically have a currency anymore, or did their currency just crash so hard it's just non-existent now?
I don't know. Yeah.
I think people are using dollars and gold and cryptocurrency.
Yep.
I think to
A
me,
lot of
what's
Dash
really-
users in Nigeria too, because apparently Nigeria's hyperinflating their currency.
Yeah.
Here's what's silly. Here's what's real silly. Think about it. God, it was on top of my tongue. Shit. Fuck it. Maybe it'll come back to me later.
All right. But Marco says, yes, the best way to prevent COVID is herd immunity. It would be better if we could get herd immunity through vaccines because they have much, much tinier risks. But if at least the healthy population, passes this around. And like I said, my nephew had it. My niece currently has it. Even if you're young and healthy, it does not feel good. You're pretty friggin' miserable if you get it. But it's better than this thing just, running roughshod. And all these lockdowns and mask mandates and everything, all they're doing is just, delaying the inevitable.
That's it.
And making
Like I said,
and
virus
making-
gonna virus.
And-
Except the way they do the lockdowns and a lot of lockdown mandated provinces for some of you, nation states for us in the U.S. They're contradictory to their what they claim the goal to be. So it just comes off as a pure power grab because again, these repeats and lockdowns are the continuation of earlier phases of the original lockdown. Tend to have people clump together more likely and spread decreasing the rate of spread, and then they wonder why. I'm sorry to say, folks, but you might lose a relative to this thing, but to use that to appeal to emotion to justify an entire lockdown infringing on millions of people's businesses.
Well,
their
what if
rights
you
to
lose?
life,
What if
their
you lose a
rights to get
relative to
together.
suicide because of increased depression because they're forced to stay in all the time?
And causing suicide increase. If you advocate for it because of that, you're still a piece of shit because you're directly a contributor to these actual problems.
I've actually,
Hey, I lost my dad. Guess what? It sucks. But but you gotta mentally grow the fuck up, or get some fucking help because you using that appeal makes you a deliberate piece of fucking shit, hands down.
Well, that's a problem in general, and why we have so many stupid laws is because that happens. It's like someone dies, everyone's like, oh, look at little Tiffany. She fell down a well and died. If only we had a law regulating wells. And then the government passes. It's like, oh no, we gotta pass a law to regulate wells. And then, there's all these dumb laws. They prove nothing. But when you point that out, they're like, are you saying little Tiffany died in vain? It's like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, consumer, they have to approve the vaccine first, and you know how obstructionist they are. There's one, I think, that's been approved in Britain, and so hopefully it'll won't be too much longer, but it's going to take time to ramp up production, and so right off the bat, it'll be, the frontline workers that get it, and then the higher risk people that'll get it, do it in kind of waves like that. And that means that all of these people who are like, well, I don't know if I want to, trust this vaccine because it just came out. Well, you're probably not going to get it right away anyway. So you'll probably have, thousands of cases to look at of people who've gotten the vaccine and be able to.
Yes, Kim. I have the perfect response when people pull The Simpsons. Someone think about the children. To quote Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob, "Why? What have children ever done for me?"
Efficacy testing, I think, is pretty good. From what I've read, the two was it Pfizer and Moderna. They have those messenger RNA viruses. I mean, the messenger RNA vaccines that are, I think, new. I think they're the first ones on the market, but they're already showing like 95% efficacy. And there's another one where they're using adenovirus, which is a cold virus, but they're using one for chimpanzees. So it cannot give a human the cold, but they're adding in the spike proteins into that one to give immunity. And I think it's not quite as effective. It's like 85, 90% effective or something like that. But it only has to be refrigerated, not kept at like -70 or whatever. So it'll be easier to, especially sending around to developing nations. So.
Oh yeah, that's very handy. Here's what I gotta say about both. Think of my women and my children. Those are the fuckers who push the most nefarious shit. Always remember that. The response to those who question vaccination.
Oddly enough, consumer mine never lost a taste or smell. They said that was never a symptom with them. The first thing was just a fever out of the blue, out of nowhere, no other symptoms, like what's going on, and they test positive, and then they get some other things. They feel bad, but I don't know. It's just kind of a crapshoot as to which.
Yeah, that's another problem with COVID. From what I've heard, is that it really has unique symptoms depending on who it infects. Like, a lot of healthy people that get it, they just report, like I said, just a general lethargy and a really bad runny nose. Some people say, oh, it was terrible. I couldn't breathe out of my nose and I couldn't eat or smell. And some people are like, oh yeah, I had to go to the hospital because I couldn't breathe on my own.
I think the breathing and like the smelling and tasting things depends on like if you already have some kind of respiratory problem, or if you're a lifelong smoker or something like that, then that'll hit you harder. Yeah. But otherwise, it'll be other symptoms you're getting. But
the other thing I was going to say was the people who question the vax. Just go back and listen to what Killian said about people getting the vaccines, but also consider this too. You have the potential to keep dairy cattle, and even dairy beefaloes for some of those who are actually interested in the subject, not particularly fertile hybrid, and camels and sheep and goats as well, to make a hyperimmunized colostrum that factors in the entirety of the deactivated version of the virus they can be injected with, or the spike protein as well. They can make immunoglobulin variants that are response to that. Their immune systems are interacting with those little proteins, permanently deactivated strains of virus strain. And in fact, let me just get real quick. They did a
basically what I understand is you give the cow the vaccine, and then the colostrum is the very first milk a cow makes after calving, and it's just like apparently just like full of antibodies, and so it'll have the antibodies for whatever it is.
It's digestive enzymes. But the antibodies are from everything the cow was ever exposed to.
Yep.
Bottom line,
and so if you've given the cow the vaccine for it, then the colostrum should have the antibodies for it as well.
Exactly, and all those other animals are listed, but that are dairy makers are also included. I forgot to mention mules, reindeer, and whatnot as well, and donkeys and horses. So that's a lot of different dairy animal potentials to milk to get the colostrum from to do this with. It's a variety. I'm gonna tell you. I'll link about a study about an anti-HIV vaginal cream made from some protein globulins that are anti-AIDS or dedicated. I'll find that real quick.
Yeah, that's the thing that people fail to realize about the FDA. I've actually read somewhere that we actually have vaccines and treatments, for a lot of disease. Like I remember reading somewhere there actually is a vaccine for things like Lyme's disease and HIV, but you want to know why it's not available? 2 reasons. One is that they can't get the insurance because because they're afraid of lawsuits, because this was around when the anti-vaccine movement kicked off. And two, and the most important one, the FDA is taking their sweet time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And yeah,
that's-
consumer, I have no idea what the whole Bill Gates thing is because, I mean, from what I know, the Gates Foundation, they don't have anything to do with like Pfizer or Moderna. They're like, oh, those people have plenty of money. They can do this. They donated to, like the smaller German company so that they'd be able to, develop a vaccine and get another one out there and get some more, competition and better production, things like that.
Well,
So,
I'm not going to entirely deny the naysay away the possibility, but the thing is, you need some actual hard proof first. And I will tell you this: they have their Israeli government was found out some progressivist independents that actually have some idea of what human rights are. It's rare. Anyway, they actually talked about Ethiopian descent, Jewish descent Ethiopians getting their women were supposedly getting vaccinated, but they were actually getting sterilized by being tricked into it and by deception, and which is an infringement on a woman's bodily autonomy. They didn't really consent to it. They're being deceived. It's fraud, and there was a sterilization act, and the Israeli government was treating that. So that's possible because of shit like that actually happening. Now we'll link it. In general, I just got through with the anti-HIV colostrum-based vaginal cream protein thing. I just got through it. I got to find that as well.
yeah, but it's like Marco
that
Polo
is
says,
possible, But you need actual connections. You need to actually have the dots to make the connection. Most do not. No, none of them do.
But
yet.
but it's like
If
Marco
there is-
Polo, like Marco Polo says, Gates giving to a vaccine. Why is that a bad thing? And he says, if
that's the
anything,
other
I like
problem.
Bill Gates now for helping the creation of a vaccine.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too. Isn't necessarily again. You need if there is something going on, you need to actually be able to have dots to connect.
And
That's
this
the
whole
thing.
microchip thing, go get your pet microchipped because first of all, it's a good idea. Second, you'll see how this works. That needle they have for that RFID chip is huge.
It's
The needle you
big.
get for the
There's
vaccine
no
is
fucking way.
teeny, teeny, tiny. There's no way you can fit in there. And then second of all, they'll test it out by reading it. Look at how close they have to get the reader to the chip to pick it up.
They got to get it real close to the surface of the skin.
Right. They basically have to make contact with the skin right where the microchip is.
Yes, and
Yeah.
the other thing too, you can't get a chip. There's a lot of factors in just physics alone due to make chips that damn tiny. We don't have any fucking means to do so largely because of quantum tunneling for one.
Yeah.
Gets in the way of that. That's just one factor. There's a whole fuck ton. We've actually had multiple discussions with it about the conspiracy nonsense about that particular microchip vaccines thing. Multiples. I've at least probed 5 of them because of how bullshit they were. I had to bring it up in the general of Bugatti alone.
Well, that's like they're making true random number generators now just because when they make diodes that tiny, there's so much quantum tunneling going on that if you look for electrons going through the wrong direction, then you're getting, like full quantum randomness there. And you can use those as entropy for your random number generator.
Okay, I think I found it. So let me double check and see if it's the right one. I think it is.
Yeah, censorship SKM is never good for things like conspiracy theories. I mean, it's just going to cause people to push back. And this is the thing. I actually got a DM from someone, and he also posted in, I think it was Lord Killian Discord. He was a neo-Nazi who is no longer a neo-Nazi thanks to my videos. I mean, that's great. I like it when people stop being neo-Nazis. And the thing is, if you're going to go, oh, they're Nazis, ban them, stop them, debank them, cancel their bank accounts and everything, how do you think they're going to react to that?
Exactly.
Do you think they're going to say, oh, gee, I guess I should stop being a Nazi, or are they just going to push back?
Yeah, I mean, I should bring this up, Shane. That's actually also why I'm against the idea that people have that we should be allowed to, if a person is mentally ill, to forcefully get them treatment, because it's like, listen, I understand wanting to help people, but look at the schizophrenic person, for example. if a schizophrenic person, like if they're so schizophrenic, they think that Nazi, alien, vampire, werewolf, lizard men are out to get them. When you come in with them with a bunch of doctors and you say, we're here to help, what are they thinking from their mind?
Oops.
Are they thinking, oh, you know what? I am crazy and they're just here to help me. No, they're thinking, oh my God, you're with the Nazi werewolf lizard men. Yeah, that's what they think, you know. I've actually heard some therapists, the way they try to help people with severe schizophrenia with their pills is they don't tell them you got to take it because it's for your own good. But what they do is they kind of they tell the truth about the effects, but lie what it's for. Like they don't say it's to treat your schizophrenia. They say, yes, I know the aliens are beaming messages in your head, but the pills will make it stop. You know. And then once their minds, you know, start to stabilize, they tell them, yep, there was no aliens probing your mind. It was just, you know, in your head, you know.
So SKM and Marco are talking about how around 2012, the skeptic movement, at least on YouTube, seemed to have declined. And I think that's because that's really around the time that, you know, the creationists kind of slinked away, and, you know, the flat earthers had a little bit of a resurgence for a while, but I mean, it was just, they didn't have anything new, and they'd just been pounded on for so long that we basically won those battles. So the real important thing is the politics, but unfortunately, very few of those seem to have taken our skeptical principles and the methods of rationality and moved them over to the political arena. Most of them just seem to have said, oh, well, this is my, and they're like I keep pointing out, they're making exactly the same fallacies that they were, you know, going after the religious people for making, the creationists and everyone else.
Yeah, and the dumbest thing I hate the most, you know, from Stathius is when they say, yeah, but we have pretty good evidence that there's probably not a God, but we know for a fact that government exists. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you know, you're always saying there ought to be a law. Let me ask you this: what stops people from breaking the law? You know, that's the problem. Is they treat laws like they're these magical incantations that automatically makes it go away. It doesn't. You know,
they basically appeal to legal positives bullshit.
Yeah. There's many laws where you might as well just, you know, just draw a circle on the ground, say gooba gaba, and wish the thing you want banned away, because you're gonna.
That's really all a law is. It's a magical incantation. We're saying the words, we're doing these right procedures and everything, and then that'll change reality somehow.
Well, then again, I think Frederick Bastiat said that the problem is that a lot of people fail to realize there's a huge difference between rules and laws. Laws are universally recognized and they're done to protect the rights of people. Rules are just arbitrations that are put in by a person or a group of people.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, I'll admit I didn't read the entire essay. I just skimmed most of it, but that's kind of like what he was saying, you know.
Oh, read the whole thing. It's good. And it's only like 50 pages or something. It's not that long.
50 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can knock that off in an hour or two. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, you know, a lot of people complain, you know, it's terrible when you have to write a 5-paragraph essay in school, but when you get into the professional world, if I recall correctly, they expect your essays to at least be a couple dozen pages long.
It depends. You know, they all have their own requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is they're like, oh, well, you want to do, you know, 15 paragraphs or whatever it is. And, you know, what if you can't think of that much to say, oh, well, here's how you do filler. And that's what it was all about. It was about adding in filler. And it's like that,
Kind of reminds me, Shane. I saw this one funny thing, and it was making fun of, you know, the fake science speak that you see in a lot of TV shows and movies and all that. It shows a fictional scientist explaining why this guy's theorem is wrong. It's like, you've got all these things wrong, not to mention it's not going to work because right there you used a cosine when it's supposed to be a tangent. And the guy asked, what does space physics have to do with triangle measurements?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I actually heard that on a cartoon one time, you know, where a guy criticizes a commentator. He's like, you put a sine instead of a cosine. And I'm just thinking, but they're not working on triangle measurements. And I may not have remembered high school math, but I know for a fact that those are only for when you're measuring triangles.
Yeah, the Atheist Reads from Steve Shives, I always thought that was a great series, and I would actually love it if he would try to do something like that with, like, Healing Our World, for example, and just go through it line by line, chapter by chapter, and give his refutation of it, as opposed to, his other quote-unquote refutations of libertarians, which is just, straw man personal attacks and invective.
And actually, Shane, you brought this up earlier. The biggest proof of all that proves that numbers are not the answer. They're just, the outcomes to an equation is immeasurable numbers, and that's the reason why central planning will never work.
Uncomputable numbers, I think you're talking about. Yeah.
Because everyone isn't. Because when you think about it, everyone, in a way, when it comes down to needs and wants, we're an incalculable number because there's no way to really predict our behavior.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're even finding things like that with the weather, because there's a thing called the Baker's algorithm, which was an early kind of pseudo-random algorithm that you could use to deterministically create numbers that appear random. And it's flawed. You'd want to use a more modern algorithm for it, but that's kind of basically what it was. But of course, in a computer is only going to use computable numbers. Well, what they were saying with the weather is that nature doesn't restrict itself to computable numbers. And even if you have like a moment in time where it's computable, it's not going to be too long before the Baker's algorithm hits a non-computable number. And then after that, it's going to go far up. And so they think that, because they're saying that, if you're going out further than 2 weeks, it's a lot more accurate to base your prediction on like the average of the last 10 years for that date or whatever than to try to project it down. And some of them are saying that they think that will always be the case just because these uncomputable numbers are just going to veer way off of anything you can calculate.
The Consumer says, I wish both Mises and Marx came back from the dead. There's actually a joke that they apparently used to say in the Soviet Union, and the joke is that if we ever revived Karl Marx and he was to see everything that communism did, his words before he went back to his grave would be, "Workers of the world, please forgive me."
John Popple actually did a Mises versus Marx rap video, which is really good. He's the same one. He did a couple... what was it? It was Keynes and Hayek videos. He did one like a year or two ago with Mises and Marx.
Yeah.
And it's really good.
Yeah, Schism asks, do you think there are any people or group that deserve to suffer violence? You know what I would say? I would say no, because yes, there are quite a few politicians out there that, you just want to, subjugate them to the same type of misery that they've put you through. But when you think about it, if you do that, then you're no better than they are,
Yeah, I don't know about the word deserve. I mean, just from the way that, you would think of such a thing happening, it would just be the consequences of their own actions. Yeah, but I mean, not in a moral sense, deserve, no, I wouldn't. It's just like you're aggressing against someone and they're defending themselves. Well, that's what happens. What do you expect?
What this kind of reminds me of? This reminds me of, I was watching, because, I can be a messed up person at times, and I love reading about, violent crime and all that, and I was watching a video, and it was about last meals, and it reminds me about, because Texas, passed a law that stopped, granting last meals to prisoners, and the guy who was behind it was like, oh, well, that's being too soft. These are violent murderers, rapists, and bank robbers. They don't deserve a last meal. That they give their victims a last meal? It's stupid. And the person trying to argue it says, that's kind of the reason why we give them a last meal and try to treat them as humanely as possible before we execute them, because that's the whole point. It's just so we're better than them,
Well, it's like if a guy tries to rape a woman and she shoots him in the face, it's not that he deserved to get shot in the face. It's that she was justified in using the violence to protect herself.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's not... I mean, you can make all the moral judgments against the person if you would. I mean, rapists are scumbags. Make all the moral judgments against them you want. But in terms of ethics, it's not about what people deserve. It's about what sort of behavior is justifiable.
Yeah, I mean... Actually, going back to that, it's kind of like what they used to teach us in school. It's what we call the clown suit principle. It's that we say, listen, bullying is wrong, and you should be free to dress in whatever you want. But if you show up to school dressed up like a clown, just don't come crying to us when people treat you like one. It's just what it is. I mean.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I tell this to people all the time. I'm sorry, feminists, but Gaston Glock has done more to save women than you ever have.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, please go fuck off with your communism and panties somewhere else.
Fun fact about Gaston Glock, the inventor of the Glock pistol. He once, when he was in his 70s, fought off a robber with a hammer. Despite even though he took a head injury. Yep, I read it somewhere. He was ambushed in his car. Some guy was trying to rob him, and despite being smashed in the head with a hammer, and being in his 70s, Gaston Glock managed to grab the hammer and turn it on his attacker. So I'm like, wow. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's another thing too. That I really hate is when people say, but we have police now. It's like, listen, unless you want to turn America into a North Korea-like state where you literally have a police officer on every single nook and cranny, that's just impossible,
There's a reason for the term police state.
Yeah. And here's another thing too when it comes to police. Even if the police do get in there, as we've seen multiple times, they are under no obligation to do anything. I mean, like you said, there's been plenty of cases, where people, have been attacked, robbed, or there's an active shooter going on. The police get there, and what do? They're told, oh, just wait.
Eliminative
Jeebus,
materialism?
it's been a while since I've heard from you, Jeebus. Jeebus asked, what's your opinions on eliminative materialism?
Materialism. Yeah, I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that
That's
is.
a good question. Let me just copy paste, see if I can find anything on it before I have an opinion.
Okay,
I don't know. We can look into it, but if you really want a question answered again, throw in the $3 super chat just to make it fair to the supporters.
You know what's really funny about materialism? It's like there's so many communists that are like, I hate capitalism because it promotes, crazy materialism, and I'm like, communists tend to be the biggest materialists ever because they're always bragging about how, under communism we had this, that, and this, that, and that, and I'm like, that's freaking materialism right there.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, materialism, how do you get things like vaccines without it?
Yeah,
I found the Wikipedia page. I don't really have much on it, but I'm reading a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah, you can't get past that calculation problem. And like we were saying earlier with uncomputable numbers, there's really no getting around it. Because, I mean, you have those Venus Project people say, oh, well, we'll just use computers. Well, no, that's not going to work.
Yeah. Fuck, I've even pointed this out to people. Even a hypothetical AGI or ASI would still be vulnerable to calculation problem as well, regardless of its singularities producing computerized or AI.
Well, and they say, there are some people who say that that's why we'll never be able to completely model the human brain with computers, because apparently the human brain, the neurons are so small, they're subject to quantum effects, which means a lot of the stuff going in our brains is based on uncomputable numbers.
And that's a possible barrier too, getting in the way, but we don't know. But again, if we manage to ever pull something as fantastic as that off, you're still gonna have it still be subject to both fucking calculation and knowledge problem, regardless. And then still,
how are you gonna solve it with linear programming? I mean, I'm sure you're being sarcastic there, Jeebus, but
he's being sarcastic. It's some fucking.
But are there people who actually claim that linear programming?
Sadly, yes. Some singularitarians do, because I've been in the was a lurker from the shadows watching those Spurgs screech out for years, and it's just ridiculous. They basically use magic, borderline magical claims about ASI and AGI and Singularity, and it really, really pisses me off. And they used, and some of them were part of the Venus Project and the fucking, what was the other one? Venus Project and Zeitgeist movements. Some of them were parts of those, yes. He's smarting off at them, those types.
I don't know how much longer I'm good for, people. I'm starting to get my eyes closing, but we can go on for a little while longer. But I think we got all the questions taken care of, so.
Yeah.
If anyone wants more of a free-for-all, probably next week is going to be the monthly live stream.
Yeah. I will say this though, Shane, and I don't want to be the buzzkill at the party, but all these people saying, yeah, we only have to have one more month till this evil year's over. I'm just thinking, I doubt 2021 is going to be any better.
Yeah, it's not about the year, it's about what people are doing.
Yeah, because...
Bovine, how you doing?
Each year
it doesn't really get worse and worse, Marco Polo. Just don't listen to all the stuff going on in the news media and just look around you. I think if you do that, you'll find that most things are getting better.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
politically, we're
too.
going down the crapper, but...
Here's another question. I heard alleged Biden was going to tax the entire welfare system by at least...
He was going to do what? You're fading.
It was alleged that Biden was threatening... Well, he did threaten to tax the Social Security and welfare system 49%.
I didn't hear that.
Point.
I know, was it Bill Clinton who did that, who started making Social Security recipients pay income tax?
Fuck, I don't know. But
I think that might
it
have
was
been
like
Clinton.
a 49% tax on all the Social Security stuff. Supposedly. Good luck trying that. It's not gonna last. It's not gonna end well if he does.
Yeah, don't look at the news, look at the stats and said, we don't know for sure because just like the election, it's not going to come out until the day happens, but I think we can all guess who the idiot of the year is going to be this year. Unless something crazy happens that Shane knows that we don't know about.
I don't know. We'll see. There's definitely going to be a podcast this Saturday. I don't know about the next one yet. $5 from Bovine. May all statists be infested with 1,000 fleas. Yeah. I wonder how much, with 1,000, is that one of those things that actually would be a lot smaller than it sounds? I mean, how many fleas are on your average dog that's infested?
Yeah, and the thing is, one thing that cartoons are kind of right is fleas are really tiny,
Yeah.
I mean, some of them you can't even see with the naked eye. You at least need a really, really powerful magnifying glass to see them.
Oh man, there's some I've caught on Frodo for like a second, and then they go down into the hairs, and you've seen him on a couple of live streams. He's a short-haired Chihuahua, but they just go right in down to the bottom of the hair, and then you can't see him. Even a black flea on a white Chihuahua, you just can't see him.
Yep, they're down there saying there's food around the corner.
There's a home around the corner.
Yep, but don't forget we are at war. So before you take a bite out of the dog, you gotta remove your dog rations.
Yep.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
I saw.
Here's creepy Joe Biden touching little Johnny. Biden, the tricycle seat sniffer.
No, consumer. Leave the firstborns out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Firstborns are not responsible for the actions of their parents.
Yeah, I mean, to quote Penn Jillette, it's like, why did God have to kill the firstborns of every Egyptian? Couldn't he just, I don't know, appear and smack the Pharaoh?
Yeah.
Pharaoh?
I hate what you're doing, so I'm going to leave you alone but kill your children.
Yeah.
I gotta say.
And the funny thing too is that it clearly says in the Bible that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. So it's like, God, why are you hardening his heart?
Yeah, that's never made any sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah, it's like, but God, why are you going to unleash all these terrible plagues to people who don't deserve it? Because the Pharaoh himself won't listen to me. Why not? Because I'm going to harden his heart. Why? Yeah, should I
bail for another god here? Because I'm not sure I want to be your follower anymore.
Yeah, it's like, on second thought, I think you're not the god of mercy. Maybe I'll give Zeus another try. You obey me, or I will inflict pain, 1,000 years of plagues and pain on your house. Okay, I'll do it. Because let's be real here, in the Old Testament, God was like that. He was the type where it's like, you better do what I say, or I will inflict years of pain and misery on you, your children, and your grandchildren.
Or have a bunch of she-bears tear you apart because you made fun of a bald guy.
That too. Hey, can I let me read this if you don't mind? I would like to read off what Skim 1091 and Marco Polo were talking about. Skim said, Ayn Rand said that she hopes that Soviet civilians were deliberately killed if the Soviets and the U.S. went to war in the 70s. I obviously don't condone that, but I don't know if I can blame her. After reading about how much she suffered there, Michael Polo said, I would personally just wait till the war was over and destroy both sides. I would have basically.
But why the civilians? The civilians, they're people who are subjected by it. It's not their fault.
Exactly. So I wouldn't think that, regardless, I wouldn't have that opinion. And if I really wanted to appeal to that, there was a time, when Chernobyl blew up and shit. When Chernobyl blew up and shit, they were having a hell of a time doing with the radiation sickness and well over 200,000 people, not including the fucking janitorial and cleanup crews and the nuclear chemists that were helping the cleanup crew, and then well over 160-something thousand children that were having their eyeballs bulge out outward and shit from the radiation sickness. There was a guy named Michael Carrick who was working on a cyanobacteria microalgae extract complex called bioalgae concentrates. He got a lab. The Ukrainians gave him some funding for that. He went over there. They treated them all within 20 days, giving them 5 grams a day of the stuff. They pissed out half of the radiation within 20 days. Their bodies started healing themselves, started getting rid of some of the radiation sickness problems. Within 20 days, 5 grams of that stuff. So, and I actually have the book on it. And it was actually incredible. But if you really wanted the Soviet tank quickly, keep Michael Carrick from going over there. They would have collapsed just from that alone. But look at all and this is an actual, unironic, but honest, what about all the fucking kids that would have died suffering from that who did that strategy? Which, by the way, would have worked killing the USSR off. Look at how fucked up it'd be. Look at the unnecessary fucking suffering that would have caused just to make it crash sooner. Think about that. Think about that, folks. That would have been effective in making it USSR fall sooner. Look at how fucked up it'd be for kids and the people in the cleanup crews. Hundreds of thousands of people. That's pretty fucked up if you think about it. I don't even want to picture it. Makes my skin crawl.
Well, I'm just saying it explains why Ayn Rand had a strong desire for Soviets, but I mean, she also called for wiping out like Arabs and Native Americans and things like that. So what did they ever do to her?
Basically, yeah, no shit. That's why I don't like Rand. I never liked her. Some of her stuff was okay, but I never liked her as a person or how philosophically contradictory she was.
I never really liked her as a writer either. She just wasn't a very good writer. I'm sorry.
I got her book, Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. It was okay. I'm not gonna give it the fucking praise that say Walter E. Williams, may rest in peace. He was one of my first two. Him and Thomas Sowell were my first two intros to economics. So I had him, the Hayekian Austrian, and then fucking Chicagoite Sowell. But anyway, I skimmed a lot. I read through it and said, and it was okay. It was okay, but it left a lot to be desired, personally, when I read it.
Well, and they're not so bad if you're talking like, an essay posted in the Saturday Evening Post or something like that. But she's putting stuff like that in the mouths of characters that does not make for very natural dialogue,
She's
it's the people, the characters she agrees with are walking essays, and the people she disagrees with are just complete intellectual drones. And none of them are interesting characters.
No. It's just, but that's the thing, like, it's decent. Unknown Ideal was decent at best. Left to be desired at worst.
Yeah.
So
you could probably pull out some good quotes here and there, but other than that.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying. Like, it's decent at best. You can quote mine certain areas. Well, not quote mine, but quote certain areas that are good. Or at best, left a lot to be desired at worst. And like I said, Walter E. Williams, despite it being one of my first two mentors in political economics as a whole, I don't think it deserved the praise he gave it. I think his forwarding and praise to Thomas DiLorenzo on writing the Abraham Lincoln book he talked about, that was what was more worthy of praise and whatnot. I think it was more earned there than Unknown Ideal.
Yeah, sorry for the dead air. I'm starting to blank out. I'm getting tired.
Yeah, well,
because
I'll let you go, Shane. I gotta leave anyway.
Okay.
Well, consumer, I think it's because a lot of people, like libertarian groups, worked with Ayn Rand off and on before she screeched at them of false allegations of plagiarism when they were leaps and bounds ahead of her in a lot of areas, and she openly stated she hated libertarians.
Yep.
It's just typically leftist or fascistic strawman, essentially, or outright lie.
Well, that's why I know a lot of libertarians hate on Milton Friedman, and he wasn't a pure libertarian, but I still like him because he was just so good at explaining a lot of this stuff, and Ayn Rand wasn't. Yeah,
Ayn Rand was fucking cringe aids at explaining shit, and Milton was just free flowing and just beautifully eloquent,
mm-hmm.
and just well worded and so versed. Just like nothing. Like, I have an idea of how you can do the negative income tax thing in modern time and make it actually work and more in line with how Milton want to do it.
How would you do it?
People wouldn't screech as much.
How would you do it?
Well, I would probably, if I had to, I would look at all the different Social Security, disability, and welfare programs. I would at least cut different welfare programs, if I could, down at least by 5/8 or at most 3/4. 3/8 to half of the other two. Get rid of capital gains and payroll cut tax permanently, if I could, and certain other fucking taxations. Then I would enable initiate the negative income tax for the lowest working class all the way up to the lowest of the middle class, cut it off there. And part of that could go into funding mutual aid healthcare units. That way I could beat the progressivists at their own game of healthcare for all, but do it with an actual liberty lenient solution and shift away from the welfare state gradually that way. And gradually phase it out.
I still like my own idea of using HSAs for that.
Oh Oh yeah, that's true too.
Using
That's
them
just-
the way that the food stamps work now, where you get the little card and they just put so much on in a month.
Yeah.
But it's like Friedman found, because I don't think he himself was all that gung ho. He just didn't like welfare, but he's like, look, if you're gonna have welfare, here's this idea of a negative income tax. Why don't we try that? And he was kind of pushing that forward just to see what opposition he got, and he got so much opposition from.
And the fucked up thing is, it would have been more effective than the current welfare system.
Yeah, but all these, Social Security union, public sector union people would have lost their jobs. So
Yeah, bureaucrats that did nothing but bungle was going to lose their bungling power and have to actually get off their asses and do something for once. I know. It's so tragic. Fuck off.
And Marco talks about government printing money. I think if there were a case, which of course, we would disagree with, but if there were a case where money printing was actually to make economic sense, it would be what they did, earlier this year with COVID. It's like, okay, we're going to give, every family $1,000 or whatever it was, because and of course, this isn't what they said, but I think you could have at least made a justifiable argument based on it. Is like, look, yes, this is going to create inflation on down the road, but we're in a crisis now. Yes, we'll be paying for it later, but we'll be able to afford it then. But I mean, that's not what they say, of course. They're just like, yoo-hoo, free money.
Yeah, it's basically when Fed govs and central banks say, "Hey, businesses, here, what are your so-called toxic assets? Let us swallow them up. Let me print you some free handout cash to bail you out of them, and do that. And let's see if this ease effect really works." And then that's essentially when they print the money to hand it out after they absorb these so-called toxic assets.
Consumer.
Really
I didn't quite make it through Fountainhead. I did read Anthem because when my daughter was in like 6th or 7th grade or something like that, she read it as part of her school requirements, and so I went ahead and read it so we could discuss it. And man, it is just so difficult to read. Just everything is so awkwardly worded, and it's just not good.
Yeah, like I was just telling Jeebus through text, there's no telling what they do with those so-called toxic assets because the competence of the whole thing. It's just so dumb and incompetent. It's crazy.
And I mean, you could argue that the story in Anthem is better than the story in 1984, but Orwell was a much better writer, so you can sit there and kind of blow through 1984 because this is an easy read. You can't really do that with Anthem. It's a lot more work to try and figure out what the hell she's talking about. Yeah, that's a good approach, Zenthoid. Just focus on your own thing. Don't sweat the politics, because it really doesn't have all that much. I mean, yeah, it kind of gets its fingers into your everyday life, but there are ways around it.
Bovine asked you a question. Do you like Neil Stephenson, Snow Crash, and et cetera, et cetera?
Neil Stephenson? I don't know who that is. Yeah, Marco, it's like the creationists. There are no new arguments. I mean, look at some of the stuff we've done and then respond to that and further the conversation, but, they're still stuck as the conversation was back in like 1960 or something.
That's the best strategy.
I don't know, man. My experience, Marco, creationists are not moving the conversation forward. And I think that's why they're fading away, because they don't have anything new and people aren't falling for it anymore.
But yeah, Marco, I think you're on the right track. I would just say especially if you're on the Social Security, like the disability system, and you get fucked on, or you have to rely on it to keep yourself afloat because you got fucked. Best thing to do is try to find someone you can actually trust to work with, you and them can, they could save half the payment on the assets, but create assets within the legal limit you have. Use them to pay for little bits of metal and crypto investment here and there over time, and get yourself propped up. And people who don't have that should do it as much as they can.
I'll tell you something. A good financial advisor will more than pay for himself.
Yes.
You get a good financial advisor. And oh man, I love mine. Is like, my goal is to get you giving as little money to the government as possible. I'm like, I like this.
Basically, yeah. And that's and hell, if you're on, and again, say if you're a non-disability and want to do stock exchange, look what the minimum level is. But if you reliant on it and you can't do anything to get off of it permanently right then, say you wanted to do what's within the legal limit in earnings, you give the rest to the person who's doing it for you, and like the legal advisor and stock broker type. That's actually that can help you. And then eventually, when you're able to prop yourself up in self-sufficiency and stuff like that, you manage to find some form of job or make your own form of employment. Over time, you can gradually shift away from the system, get off of it, game employed, and
but yeah, don't sweat the don't sweat the politics. And I mean, I know the news media makes a big deal out of a lot of stuff and likes panicking people. Whenever you're dealing with the news media, just remember that they're an industry based on the idea of if it bleeds, it leads. They're not into good news. They're not into reassuring you. They are into trying to make you panic over every last little thing. And it's probably not worth panicking over. Yeah, Xanthoid, form an LLC, do whatever you can to give the government as little of your money as possible.
That would be a panarchy, Consumer 23. That would be a form of panarchy, theory and practice.
Yeah, and that's my version of anarchism. Isn't, take it all down by throwing Molotov cocktails and blowing it all up. Just let us build out alternatives. Let us have cryptocurrencies as an alternative to your money. Let us have the dark web as an alternative marketplace. And stop, raiding the homes of everyone you think might be a little bit involved in the creation of them.
Okay, Marco. Essentially, panarchy and minarchism. Minarchism is an absolute minimal state, and like there's so-called legitimized coercion, appeal to authority nonsense. One a panarchy would be a central government body, exactly as Consumer 23 described, but you could leave its services without having to move or give up your property rights or all that non-bullshit.
So basically medieval Iceland.
Medieval Iceland, the last what led right before the final 1,000 years of Gaelic Ireland, right before that.
Yeah.
And because that's what's unique about both, like Gaelic Ireland, you can argue anarchism, but right in period from in between the old Brehon Law central government and the dissolving of it to basic market anarchistic for the 1,000 years, that middle spot could be justification anarchy, etc., etc. Well, they wouldn't be statists now, would they? They wouldn't be statists, Consumer. That's the thing.
Yeah, if you're voluntary, you're not a statist.
If it's voluntary, you'd be panarchy and have any form of centralized government structure you could. And, like, the only way you would have that, I think the only 2 models you could do it, there might be 3 or 4, but I think the best one you could have would be, say, a covenant community structure, depending on what your desire is. Say if you want to be culturally conservative or if you wanted to be segregationist voluntarily or whatnot. CC, without doing anything that violates the NAP or violates property rights. CC would be a counter regulation against it. But like some form of constitutional republic panarchy or a ultra minimal monarchist panarchy, that'd be two ways of doing it. And the property rights would be a co-ownership of each with the monarch and the property owner, and they could dissolve the co-ownership and take the full property rights to themselves. It's an extension of something that Paul Birch talked about. Call it an ultra minimal monarchist state, but no, it wouldn't be a state at that point because it'd just be a fucking panarchy. So.
Yeah, consumer, I've been thinking about, communist enclaves inside a free market. I mean, the way I'm thinking that they might be able to do it is if they're not just staying to themselves, but they're actually trading with the outer market for the things they need and providing services and things like that. They would just be functioning, more like a large household would. But I mean, you're still going to have the scaling problems, when you hit Dunbar's number, things like that. But if they're small enough, yeah, they might be able to.
Fucking lol, Jeebus. Fucking lol. Mm-hmm. See, that's the thing, Manny Marco. It's not really anarcho. It would be more panarcho monarchism. Put a P in front of it, and that would be the actual proper titling. Mm-hmm. Or else you're oxymoroning yourself to oblivion.
Every single person on the planet is a monarch of his own life. How about that?
But what was I going to say? Oh, the closest thing to both a syndicalist, communist, and a mutualist that's in real world practice is Zapatista. Hope I said that correct. Zapatista. Army of National Liberation, but they claim to be anti-capitalist, but they're voluntarily doing it, and they're doing some type of capitalist elements to it to keep themselves afloat, or else they would have done fell apart long before now, and they've been around since 1994. Tens of thousands of civilian supporters and 7,000 active participants in big militia.
SKM asks if we're looking forward to 5G. I think 5G might actually have the potential to break up the cable and telco duopoly that exists with high-speed internet, because, I mean, T-Mobile is already offering this, but it's not as expensive as cable. It's like $50 a month, but it's only like 30 megabits or something like that. They're going to have to do better bandwidth if they want to compete with cable and the telcos. But 5G might give them the bandwidth to do that. So,
yeah. Oh, man. Yes, Marco, that's true. The internet is an ultimate example of anarchistic life. And
until they raid you like Ross Ulbricht and give you a double life sentence plus 40 years.
Basically. Do that, back alley.
Which doesn't mean
seeing that.
Which doesn't mean that 1,000 clones of the Silk Road didn't pop up overnight after that happened.
Net neutrality is such a loaded subject. If the core notion of a non-censoring internet, that already basically shows there's a high demand for it on the market. You can have a contractual private enterprise equivalent to such. And
how do the same people who are doing net neutrality are the same people behind the deplatforming and the unbanking and everything? How do they make those two jive?
I don't fucking know. It's the mental gymnastics is astonishing. And I used to be a fucking syndicalist leaning with Marxian leanings, fucking somewhat left pointing center pointing left, far lefty. But back, and it was a Bernie bro back in 2016, and I still can't understand the mental gymnastics. I got disillusioned by the lies of Noam Chomsky and some other bullshit. Then I glanced through Das Kapital and the Commie Manifesto, and I got disillusioned quickly. Mm-hmm. Then I argued with Marxists and a bunch of others, and that's kind of reminds me of how I mirror Hayek in that sense, except he was a Fabian socialist.
Net neutrality, when was that repealed? It's been a couple of years, hasn't it? since it's been repealed?
It's been about 2015, 2016 or some shit. It came to a full end.
I didn't think it was quite that long, but it's been like 2.5, 3 years, something like that, hasn't it?
At least, but
And so where's all this, internet apocalypse that was supposed to, well, they were going to, charge us more money to use YouTube and charge us more money to use this and charge us more money. Where is that?
thank you for the correction, Pierre Colin. Yeah, where the fuck is it? So it basically
2017. Okay, so basically 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. But and what's funny is,
But this is like, I mean, there's not really any one news outlet, new or old media, that I, fully agree with. But TechDirt is one I keep going back to. And there's this one writer they have, Carl Bode. He's really good, except when he gets on his, big net neutrality high horse and there was like an article he wrote like a couple of weeks ago. And I think he was like, he was starting to mention like the telco and cable monopolies and things like that. And I was fooled for a second into thinking that he was actually going to talk about, stopping, state and local governments from giving these monopoly powers. And it was one of those cases where he was in first place, just heading for the finish line. And then at last second took a hard right and crashed into the wall.
and
so
what's
You're
funny,
almost there.
So you
What's
thought you got
funny-
rid of me?
Yeah.
what's fucking hilarious is back in 2017 December, there was a statute in I think it was like 80s municipalities or cities in Colorado. Colorado fucking left the statute back in 04, 05. And then they accumulated companies and resources to build their own neutral, uncensoring internet, which basically concedes to what I was saying about there being a demand for it. So it was going to be supplied in one way or another. They just had the local governments give capital to the businesses willing to make such an internet happen, and it was just state and city government branches just conceding to the market demand and just letting it happen. In fact, helping it, which is a very rarity in history, an exception to the fucking rule. And it's hilarious. And Jimmy Dore was the guy who reported on it, which ironically concedes to us libertarians about this in a fucked up exception of the rule type of way and how it was performed. Like the assistance aspect, I mean. Like, dude, just proved us.
Yeah, Mark, I remember there was years ago, kind of at the heyday of Second Life. And, Second Life had their own little currency and everything, and people were trading back and forth. And government was talking about, yes, we might have to regulate this economy in Second Life. It's like, what? You gotta get your fingers in everything.
Yeah, it's like South Park's portrayal of Disneyland. It's like my name is Randy Marsh. I live in South Park. Who's South Park? Do I own them yet? Yeah. Well, to be fair, Disney only owns everything because of copyright laws. If there was no copyright laws, there'd be no incentive for them to buy everything, because what would be the point?
Yep.
Yeah. That's what I keep telling
There wouldn't
people.
even really be a concept of buying them.
Yeah, because what would be the point? The reason why Disney buys all that property is so they can hold exclusive copyrights for it. No copyright law, then what's the point?
Well, the point is, you could say, hey, we're going to make a new Star Wars movie, and Disney could do that. But then Netflix could say, well, we'll make our own Star Wars movie, and we'll see whose is better. And maybe, Disney would actually have to put some resources into things like character development.
Yeah,
and thinking through the plot to make sure it actually makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the real reason. They said, oh, we canceled the original expanded universe because it would have been too much to implement. It's like, AKA, we were lazy. We didn't want to hire a team to read through years. We didn't want to hire a continuity team, so we just pulled the plot out of our buttholes.
You wouldn't have to do that much. Just put a call out to the Star Wars conventions. You'd have plenty of them, poring over every last little detail.
Oh, hell yeah. This is what I did. I did a comment on Vito's channel on the on the video lecture. Rise of Skywalker, complete cinematic failure, and this is exactly what the fuck I said. Hey guys, Star Wars Legends universe should, or even the multiverse if you wanted to go that far, fucking crazy with it, could be had more relaxed so-called copyright around some of its content areas, and made it easier for Lucas to have access to or whatever, and its content and staunch loyalty demands, right? That way we could have a sequel trilogy started off with Star Wars 7, A New Threat, starring Cade Skywalker, the distant grandson of fucking the now dead Jedi Grandmaster Luke, was living a life of a space pirate. You could have gotten 4 more trilogies off of that. You also could have had a movie like in between the episode 7 and episode 6 called The Cult of Waru, a Star Wars story. But I'm not going to give details about that script. I'll just leave that as a crossover with my trademark of my channel or a character connected to it and that story. I'll just leave that for Wattpad.
But I mean, it's not even that. It's like, even if you
cringy fuck. Yes, I do.
Even if you look at Solo, which didn't have any of the bad characters of the of the latest trilogy sequels, and it was even directed by Ron Howard, who knows how to make a friggin' movie, and it just makes me wonder, what were the Disney higher-ups doing to, because I cannot imagine Ron Howard just making that movie on his own.
But yeah, that's just the bare minimum idea of what you got. There's so much to work with. You could have had a Star Wars story like mid-pool, like Solo movies to tide people over, to start the rest of the fucking
little off topic. Shane, did you say you were getting tired to get rid of me?
No, I'm just getting tired. I think I'm about to go. We've been going for 2 hours. I don't think I can go any longer.
That's why I left, because I thought the live stream was over.
Yeah, I'm trying to wind it down because I'm winding down, and Wes has been pretty much carrying it.
Yeah. The only problem with my problem with the EU is the characters are awful, and everything they do, and everything
that's very accurate.
And everything they do,
that retarded.
everything they do is.
Beck Alley posted, "Hey, my favorite old Kalinsky tweet was the one where he took a picture of farms in Colorado during the winter and asked why nothing was growing." That's it. He's retarded. No shit.
Oh god, there was one that was like, I mean, this was way years ago, but it was a picture. It was like an aerial picture of a forest in wintertime. And so, you have the clusters of pines that are evergreens, and you have the clusters of deciduous trees that don't have, any leaves on them because it's fallen off because it's winter. And people were trying to pass it around as, all these trees were dying because these corporations were polluting the land, and look at that, and it's just all this. It's like, but look at a picture of the same forest in summer.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Kind of reminds me of that one picture of that. I think you mentioned this one time, Shane, about that one guy who was reporting. I think it was on Hurricane Sandy, and they were kind of trying to spin a global warming angle. So they were trying to say this is the worst storm that we've ever seen, and scientists are saying it'll only get worse. And like he's acting like like he's barely hanging in there. But then you look closely and you notice that the wind's blowing in the opposite way. He's pretending to resist.
Yeah, this was just supposed to be answering questions anyway. We can talk about anything you guys want when I do the monthly live stream, probably next week sometime, but I'm going to bow out of this one. So thank you guys so much for showing up.
Okay.
Yeah. And thanks to everyone who gave a super chat. Thanks to all of the supporters, especially the ones who asked questions, everyone who participated in the chat. Above all, thank you for watching. Please look at the links here. You can go to donate.bogosity.tv. Give me anything you like. I will try and get an edited version of this up for people who just want the answer. So thank you very much. Until next time, stay strong and be free.